I was fired from the company I had worked at for years for unreasonable reasons. After that, I got a job interview through a friend's referral. But during the interview,
You know, we don't hire bottom-of-the-barrel high school dropouts.
the interviewer was looking down on me while trying to suppress laughter. Panic-stricken and unable to stop the sweat on my palms, I clenched my fists, endured, and left the interview room.
Excuse me, please come back to the interview room immediately.
Stopped suddenly by the receptionist, I was confused but returned to the room and was fixated on a man. Later, I found myself crying my heart out for the first time in my life because of what this man said. My name is Jake Morrison. When I was about to start elementary school, my parents died in an accident. At that time, my sister Lily was just 2 years old. It was too early a goodbye. I was sad, but I couldn't think of anything. And I couldn't explain to little Lily that our parents were suddenly gone. However, I vaguely understood that I had to be strong because I was the only family left to protect her. After that, Lily and I were taken care of by relatives on our mother's side. It was the furthest place from where we lived. There were other relatives in the place we were born and raised, but it was considered kinder to start anew elsewhere than to continue living locally and be reminded of our parents. There was also a cousin my age in that home, so there was hope that we could spend time like siblings. We left with just a few belongings and only one picture of our parents. It marked the start of our new life, but initially, Lily's night crying was frequent. Moreover, the aunt of my relative gave up after just a few days. So, I had no choice but to soothe her, often falling asleep with her in my arms throughout the night. Gradually, my cousin began to distance himself from us.
You're just a freeloader. Be grateful. I don't want to be associated with someone like you at school, so don't talk to me.
My cousin, who was normal at home, looked down on me at school.
Okay, got it.
I said that, determined to endure until I could graduate from compulsory education. I planned to work right after graduation to support Lily and myself, focusing intensely on my studies. Time passed, and I graduated from high school safely. I was 18 years old then, and Lily was 14. On graduation day, I visited the house of an old man I used to stop by on my way home from school to say goodbye. This old man was Frank Johnson with a very intimidating face. One day when I was a young boy in elementary school, I found a lost boy on my way home, who turned out to be Frank's grandson. After that, I saw him often in the park, and our conversations increased. I could talk to Frank, so I shared my background with him. Frank usually had a stern face, but he was cheerful and really funny when he talked. At first, he listened to my story with a frown, but then he patted my head and said, "After you graduate high school, come work at my company. Keep up your studies until then." I remember his hand being very warm. I had always felt cared for by him, so on graduation day, eager to show him the small paper flower up into my chest badge and my diploma, I ran as fast as I could. Frank waited for me in front of his house, timing it with my walk home from school. When I presented my diploma, Frank grinned, showing his teeth, and ruffled my hair vigorously.
All right, Jake, come to my company starting tomorrow. I'll lend you a company apartment, so you and Lily can live there.
I thanked him and nodded repeatedly. By that time, Lily and I had hardly spoken to the family we lived with, except at meals, and slept huddled together in a small room. Since we had few belongings, I packed up our stuff after the morning graduation ceremony and prepared our new home before Lily got out of school. I waited for her on the way home from school and then took her to thank the relatives. The cousin wasn't there. Not that we had anything to say to each other. The relatives didn't try to stop us from leaving to live on our own.
You could have stayed. It's a shame, but good luck.
My aunt said, her usually stern face showing a slight smile. And as we left, I heard her quietly say, "Finally they've gone." I knew we were the reason, but I was still grateful. I deeply expressed my sincerity and headed to our new home for the two of us. After that, I worked hard. Frank acted as a guardian, so Lily could continue at the same school without transferring. That allowed me to focus on my job. Lily studied cooking at home and made meals for me every day. We both tried our best. 15 years passed, and I turned 33. By then, Lily had moved out when she got a job, so apart from sending money and occasional updates, we didn't interact much. One day, I went to work as usual, but Frank was not there. The office was in chaos, and I couldn't grasp what was happening until a phone call left me frozen. Frank had died in a car accident, I learned from his wife's call. I rushed to the hospital, but it seemed everything had progressed since it happened the night before. After offering my condolences to his wife, I left the hospital without being able to do anything. I was told it was better not to see Frank's last face, so I never did. For a while, I was in a daze. But I couldn't quit my job, so I returned to work after a week. The atmosphere at the company felt different, and the new president, who took over, was very unreasonable. Maybe he didn't like that I, a high school grad, had been favored by the previous president, as he started assigning me only menial tasks despite my hard work on the front lines before. I felt like my shifts were gradually being reduced until one day my name was completely off the schedule. The president told me, "You don't need to come back," and I was effectively kicked out of both the company and the company housing. Fortunately, I had savings from all the work I had done. Plus, I hadn't touched the life insurance money from my parents, saving it for when Lily got married. I quickly rented a small apartment and started looking for a new job. But finding another job was tough. Being a high school grad, I got cut at the resume screening stage. Even the staff at the employment office started recognizing me. Wondering what to do next, I calmed my mind with a coffee at a cafe on a weekday when my usually silent phone rang. It was a call from an old friend, Jake Thomas. Since my elementary school wasn't large, with only about 2 classes per grade, I knew almost everyone by face. Jake Thomas and I were especially close, and he, having many friends across different grades, took me to various places. Since we both had the same first name, to avoid confusion, everyone, including me, called him by his initials, JD. When we were together, people gathered around us, and even our little mishaps became trends. Together, we felt unstoppable. JD kept looking out for me even after we entered high school, but gradually, we lost contact after graduation. Why now, after all this time? Tentatively, I answered the phone. From the earpiece came a familiar, cheerful voice.
"Long time, no see. How've you been?"
JD went to a high school out of state after graduating, which led him to attend college there too. So, he rarely came back home, but recently he returned and called to catch up over drinks. With nothing much to do, I eagerly accepted, and we agreed to meet that night at a pub near the station. It had been a while since I had a leisurely meal with someone, so I felt unusually excited and dressed in my most stylish outfit. At the agreed time, I arrived to find JT already seated, having started drinking.
Jake, you've aged a bit, haven't you?
JT noticed me, set down his glass, and smiled. I thought it wasn't the best opening line, but it eased my tension, leading to a lively trip down memory lane.
Jake, are you still working at that company?
JD asked about my recent life as if he just remembered. Honestly, I wanted to avoid heavy topics and didn't have the courage to speak about Frank myself. Sensing my hesitation, JD kindly said,
"It was really unfortunate about Frank.
I looked at JD in surprise.
I heard from Lily. You know, she and my sister were close. So she thought you must be sad and wanted to cheer you up. Jake, you've always been so dedicated."
I quit the job, you know, being a high school grad and all, I'm not too sharp. It seemed I didn't fit with the new president's agenda. JD looked at me with a slightly apologetic, complex smile, but then became serious and said,
"I have a proposition for you, Jake. If you're interested, why don't you interview at this company?"
Seeing me puzzled, he pulled out a small piece of paper hurriedly torn from the back of an ad from his pocket. The paper had only an address and contact information. JD said he'd set up an interview for me too, since then's a group interview next Monday. I was so tired from my stalled job hunt that I decided to lean on JD's kindness. That night, I drank a bit too much. But it had been a while since I had laughed over trivial stories. After a light farewell with JD, promising to drink again, I got home past 2 a.m. I felt like I was back in my school days, all excited, and I think I slept really well that night, for the first time in ages. On the day of the interview next week, I donned my slightly worn interview suit and headed to the specified location. The building I found, following the map, was impressively large. Feeling uncertain if this was really the place, I checked with the receptionist, who confirmed my interview was scheduled. In the meeting room, there were a few others, presumably there for the interview. With no conversation, we sat waiting nervously, and right on time, two guys walked in. Feeling nervous for my first interview in a while, it progressed better than expected. The man seated in the center had a badge that read, HR Director, Max. One of the three chairs appeared to be empty. Since there was a drink on the seat, I didn't pay much attention, assuming someone was just temporarily absent. The interviewers sat down, alternating between looking at our resumes and our faces, jotting down notes and asking questions. It seemed like a typical group interview. Waiting for my turn made me more nervous, and as it drew closer, I could hear my heartbeat in my throat. But when it was my turn, Max, who had been reading my resume, gradually looked more troubled. Then, he slowly let go of the resume. It fluttered to the floor.
You know, we don't hire high school dropouts.
Max said, seemingly trying to hold back a laugh. Instantly, I felt my face get hot. And then, Max began to put away the documents. It seemed my high school grad status was indeed an insurmountable issue. I couldn't stop the sweat on my palms. I clenched my fists and endured, but the interviewers, looking dismayed, seemed to have no intention of proceeding further. It was frustrating, but I also felt it was a waste of time to stay any longer. I had wasted my old friend's kindness. Thinking I should apologize over the phone, and not bother him anymore, I stood up in the middle of the interview to express my gratitude. "Thank you for your time." As I walked to the door, I thought I heard some laughter behind me. Before the door fully closed, the interview seemed to move on to the next person. My mind was in turmoil. Overwhelmed with embarrassment and helplessness, I just wanted to get away from there, so I quickly headed towards the entrance. But as I reached the automatic doors past the reception, a receptionist hurriedly stopped me from behind.
Excuse me, Mr. Jake Morrison, please come back to the interview room immediately.
I was confused. Was it wrong to leave the interview midway? I speculated but returned to the interview room immediately, partly because the receptionist looked a bit pale, and I felt sorry for her. Back in the room, one man was furiously asking,
Hey, where's Jake?
The high school dropout. We sent him away because he's nowhere near the level of this company. It's surprising he even got to this interview.
What are you saying? His salary was supposed to be $1 million. I offered it myself.
What? $1 million? Is there some mistake? But he's just a dropout.
Jake, me, $1 million. Shocked at the bizarre situation, I wondered if I was in the wrong room until I saw the man's build. JD. His badge read, CEO Jake Thomas. It took a moment to grasp the situation, but JD rushed over as soon as he saw me. And he explained loudly enough for everyone to hear.
Everyone, please listen.
JD put his hand on my shoulder, took a deep breath, and said,
The Jake here is an old friend from my elementary school days. He could only finish up to high school for a reason. He was smarter than me and could have been recommended for further studies. But he chose to work to support his sister, striving and working hard to get here. And he's not someone who betrays others. He's the only man I truly trust and respect.
With that, he looked at Max. Max quickly averted his eyes.
High school dropout. High school dropout. When did this company start judging people by their education? I never gave such a lowbrow directive. Right, Max? I've decided to work only with people I can trust, regardless of their education. You get what I'm saying, don't you?
I'm sorry.
JD continued, explaining that he founded the company.
I started this company filled with hope, with a man I thought was my best friend during college. But in the end, he just took the information and ran. It's shameful being betrayed by someone I trusted.
Oh my gosh. I felt like I was seeing JD's sad face for the first time.
It reminded me that I wanted to work with people I could trust, good friends. The reason I originally felt that way was because of Jake. The only person I really wanted to work with from the bottom of my heart was Jake. I had given up because Jake had family circumstances that made it impossible. But after hearing about Jake's situation from his sister, I thought now was the time. Hey, Jake, won't you help me grow this company? I need your strength.
He trusted me immensely but mentioned that as a company rule, we had to go through the interview process. He also said he cared for me like family. Before I knew it, I found myself staring at JD, tears streaming down my face. Even after my parents and Frank were gone, I never cried. Once the tears started flowing, all the pent-up emotions came rushing out, and there was a fear that I might completely break down.
When we grow up, we're going to build a huge company like a maze, right?
JD's words brought back buried memories. Back in elementary school, during recess, doodling in our notebooks, JD and I played around. In the corner of JD's notebook, filled with drawings of legendary swords and mythical treasure chests, I drew an intricate maze. I remembered how JD praised my maze, and then he added monsters and treasure chests to it. In the large space near the goal on our drawing, we unanimously wrote Boss's Room and laughed together. I nodded, my face filled with shame. The interviewers were wide-eyed, watching us. My potential role as the vice president and the president's friend seemed to make them reconsider their treatment of me.
We will inform you of the decision later,
JD said, ending the interview abruptly and gesturing for me to follow him by pulling at my sleeve. In a daze, I was led to a room marked with a childlike aluminum plate reading Boss's Room next to the door. I recognized the handwriting. Seeing that, I just let loose and burst out laughing loudly. JD was also laughing along, caught up in the moment. One of the interviewers, HR manager Max, was later found to have been selecting candidates based on personal likes and dislikes. It seemed like he was blowing off steam, maybe because he'd seen people with exceptional circumstances like high school dropouts get embarrassed and rejected during interviews despite making a good impression. It also came out that he was unfairly favoring certain female employees, leading to his dismissal for being interest-worthy. Later, I officially became the vice president, declaring that JD and I would elevate the company together revived our friendship from school days. Our company, extending its network from peers to acquaintances, grew rapidly. One day, when new ventures were taking off, JD said,
Jake, there's something I want to discuss.
He called me to the usual pub near the station. Beside JD sat Lily. What's going on? I blurted out unexpectedly, but Lily, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, had grown up beautifully. She slightly resembled the gentle expression of our mother, a faint memory I had. Though I couldn't say this to Lily, who didn't remember our parents' faces. JD, usually so composed, seemed oddly nervous, which made me feel an exquisite discomfort, but that quickly turned into certainty.
I'm dating Lily with the intention of getting married. I want to marry her, so I hope you'll approve of that,
JD said with earnest eyes. My vision blurred, and I couldn't clearly see their faces. So, I can entrust the most important person to the most trustworthy man I know. I immediately thought there was no reason to object. I consented right away, patted the now grown-up Lily's head, and smiled, saying how happy I was for her. Later, I gave them the inheritance left by our parents as Lily's wedding fund. Both Lily and JD were in tears. Afterward, I received a wedding invitation from them. This time, I took my wrinkled suit to the cleaners. On the wedding day, wearing that suit, Lily told me I looked cool, which made me smile. I wondered if I should have bought a more expensive suit. Lily was incredibly beautiful. The days when I walked around our small room carrying a crying Lily on my back, unable to sleep at night, felt like a distant past. At Lily's wedding, I fell in love for the first time with one of her friends. I plan to slowly nurture this new love. After the wedding, I returned home and sat in front of the family picture. I talked to my parents' faded photographs. I did it. I married off Lily. With the money you left behind, I could give her a beautiful wedding. Thank you. Since then, I seem to have become a bit more tearful. The parents in the photo seem to be smiling a bit. I've learned two things in life from this experience. One is to cherish the people I meet. It sounds simple, but it's hard to grasp. Life has many crossroads. And at each one, I've met someone who has helped guide my choices. So, I believe every encounter has meaning. As they've all been connected to pivotal moments in my life. I'm grateful to these people, and want to cherish them always. The other is to trust my decisions. Sure, I might be betrayed sometimes. But I believe it's my continued faith and happiness that has brought me to this moment. I've been doing it that way, and I'll keep doing it that way in the future. If I decide to be happy, I'm already on that path. I trust myself to keep going forward.